Hi, everybody. Hi. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the webinar today, the Change at the Checkout, which is going to review a study that was done by friends of ours at Good Scout Group. So first of all, hello to all of you on the phone. I just want to take a quick second and familiarize any of you who haven't used this webinar platform before with the layout. The left side, there in the left margin, there's a chat box, and you are able to communicate with me via that chat. If you have a question, please type it in there and just hit, you can send it to me directly, and I will be able to see that. For the time being, I'd love to make sure that everybody's able to hear clearly and everything's okay. So everybody who's on the line, if you could type into that chat box, anybody, let me know, are you hearing me okay? And I'll just wait to see some confirmations that you're actually able to hear okay before we get to all the good stuff. All right. Thanks, Mary. Okay, great. Thank you, Susan, Candace. Okay, great. Wonderful. It looks like we're getting some positive feedback. All right. So now that I know I'm not just speaking into a black hole, that's helpful. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. My name's Amy DeVita, and this is an educational webinar from Third Sector Today and Top Nonprofits. Just to give you all, if you're not familiar with us, we are two online digital resources for nonprofit professionals. What we're trying to do is share tips, insights, best practices, and resources to all of you folks who are trying to do some good in the world. So thank you. We're here to provide you with some tools to be able to do that more easily too and more effectively. So Third Sector Today and Top Nonprofits, thank you again for joining us. We will be talking with, this will be a different format than usual. It's going to be a conversation, sort of an interview, and I would love for everyone here to participate. I even have an in-room guest, which is rare, but Eileen Morales, who is the executive director at the Red Mill Museum here in Clinton, New Jersey, and it's the most iconic thing in the entire state, the Red Mill, so happy to have her here, and thank you for joining us, Eileen. You're welcome. We can't hear. She says you're welcome, so thank you. And what our guest, our special guest who's not in this room but is in Austin, Texas, her name is Maureen Carlson, and she's president of Good Scout Group. Good Scout is a social good agency. Their main goal is to connect nonprofits with corporations that can help, that align with their messaging, with their missions, and help them promote and elevate their causes. And that's something we're very interested in doing here too. And before we get started, let me go back. The format will be more of a conversation. So Maureen had conducted a study that was inspired by the idea of, all of the checkout campaigns that have gained popularity over the years, wanting to really understand more about the people who give, why they give, et cetera. So she'll go into some detail about that, and then we'll do sort of a question-answer format from that point on. I'll be monitoring the chat bar, so if any of you in the audience today have a question, please submit it there, and I will ask Maureen. So this is your opportunity. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is that, like so much that we do here, this particular webinar was inspired by one of our very strong members who has been with us since the beginning, and you know who you are, he's out there. He had suggested a webinar focusing on checkout campaigns. So that was the impetus, and we're happy to be able to deliver. That said, all of you out there, if you have something you want to hear about, please, shoot me an email, amy@thirdsectortoday.com. All right. So before I put everybody to sleep, let me just give you the overview. The headlines are this. Last year, $388 million was raised through checkout campaigns in the United States, and anybody that's bought anything at any store lately, I'm sure you've been asked, would you like to make a donation? So they are everywhere, and what we're here to talk about today is, are they for you? Is it something that your organization can participate in or get in on the action? And if so, how and why? So maybe not in that particular order. The top three, and we did a couple posts about this in the past on our site, the Cause Marketing Forum held its annual conference in Chicago in May, and they released the top campaigns from last year. The top three were eBay, Walmart, and McDonald's, very big names. So that's going to actually be one of our questions today, is talking about, does it have to be a big name? Those are really huge, significant campaigns. Is there something that, if you're a smaller organization, is there some way we can take advantage of this, is sort of one of the questions that we'll be asking. Okay, so now that you know that we're in downtown Clinton, that we have the Executive Director of the Red Mill with us to ask some questions from the Executive Director Insight perspective, I'm going to pass over to Maureen. And Maureen, if you could take a moment, please, and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization.
Sure. Thank you, Amy. And I appreciate everybody on the phone. I'm thankful to be presenting today. Always fun to do that. So I am the president of Good Scout. Good Scout is a social good agency. We work with nonprofits and corporations alike. In the nonprofit sector, what that really means is that we do everything from soup to nuts around corporate alliances. Our goal is to really work with nonprofits so that they can align with corporations in a multifaceted, maximized way and really see all of the great outcomes and opportunity of those relationships. And we do that. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought I had a question. And we do that across the board. One of the things that we talk about all the time with our clients that comes up is point-of-sale campaigns. We have looked at them from every direction in terms of best practices, how to pitch them to companies, how to implement them, the kinds of things that companies are looking for in these campaigns so that they're highly successful for them, the nonprofit, and the consumer. We are often talking about that and working with our clients on creating successful retail campaigns at point of sale. But one of the things we really wanted to do was go deeper. We really did want to understand. We've had a series of conversations with corporations throughout the years, really accelerated over the past year, about, them asking questions. Is this worth it for us? Should we be going direct to consumer? How do you think our consumers feel about it? How long should we be doing these campaigns? And so we decided to tackle all of those questions. I hate to be in a room with a client and not be able to answer a question based on data, and so we decided to go get some. So, yes, the Cause Marketing Forum puts out their charitable checkout. They do it about every other year. What they found is that there is $338 million being raised right now, but the caveat there is that they only looked at $1 million plus promotions. So they only looked at the campaigns that generate about $1 million in the marketplace. And there are so many more that generate significant amounts of money for smaller or medium-sized nonprofits that are not in that study. And so we would estimate it's more about $500 million being raised around the country through all sizes of all campaigns that go direct to consumer at register or at point of sale. So we wanted to know how the consumer felt about it. So we know it's happening. We know it raises significant amounts of money. Children's Miracle Network alone raises about $300 million in their balloon pinup campaign in April, direct from consumer at point of sale. We know the Thanksgiving campaign at St. Jude is edging up to about $100 million between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So we know that organizations are raising significant amounts of money, but how did the consumer feel about it? So that's what we did. We created a study that really talks about or asks the consumer about their affinity for this, how they feel about it, what is their feedback. So we were trying to answer this simple question: how do you really feel about being asked at register all the time to give? So the only reason I wanted to talk about this particular slide here is only because I wanted to show you that we did go direct to consumer, a span of every demographic. We went to about 3,000 consumers, which is double a standard amount that people usually do when they do direct to consumer research studies. The reason it is double is because we did it twice. The original findings I was surprised by, to be quite honest with you. I thought it would be different, and so I said go back again, new pool of people, cross demographics, and see if we get the same sort of answers. And surprisingly, we did. And so I'm about to go through from a very high level just some of those findings for you so that we can sort of set a stage before we jump into our Q&A that we're going to do around some of this. So this is just a simple infographic of the results. The actual study can be found and downloaded for free on our website, which is goodscoutgroup.com. But this is a summary infographic, and really I'm just going to call your attention to the corners, for lack of better words here. Some of the things that we found, first of all, we wanted to set a baseline. We wanted to know how many people are actually giving at register. So we wanted to know, of the people that are asked, what percentage are giving. And so you'll see there that 71% of consumers are donating at the register. So that's a really good thing. That's a high number. It's a high volume of people that say yes at register and are actually giving. And that's an important piece of information for both corporate retailers to know and to understand that people are engaging at that volume of level. It shows an affinity. And it's also important for a nonprofit to know when they go in and pitch this idea of aligning and going direct to consumer at retailer so that the brand, the retailer understands people are doing it. They're responding positively to it. They're responding en masse. So 71% of people are actually giving at register. If you move over to the right, there's a little bubble that says 1 in 2, and all that really says or means is that 1 in 2 people, or 50% of the people, it was a little over, it was about 55% of the people who are asked at register and are giving, they don't mind it. They actually like it. That's the stat that made me go back and do it twice. So that's a really good piece of information. A lot of brands were assuming that they were annoying their consumer. They were assuming that it was something that was unwelcomed at the register. But what we found out is that it's become really part of the national vernacular. It's an expectation almost now at retail that at some point you're going to be asked by a retailer to donate to a cause. And 1 in 2 people don't mind it, like it, embrace it, are okay with it. Again, you can see from a pitch standpoint and then from a corporate retailer standpoint why that's important to know. If you go down to the bottom of that infographic on the left, you'll see this is when we get into some of the information that's helpful for nonprofits to understand sort of the power of marketing and the power of branding. And it doesn't necessarily mean that people who don't have a strong brand can't engage at point-of-sale activities, but we did ask consumers, what's sort of the number one reason that you give at register? And what we found is that the number one reason is brand recognition. And it makes sense. When you're at a register, you have about 5 seconds, right? 5 seconds to make a decision about what you're going to do, if you're going to give to the cause or not. And so recognizing the brand or the cause that you're giving to makes sense that would be ranked sort of high, in this case, number 1. But what I wanted to tell you behind that real quick is that very, very, very closely, it was like a 2 percentage points difference close behind that, is that you have an affinity or a connection to that cause. So that's where I say if you aren't, a blue chip nonprofit out there with a saturated brand that everybody has heard of, there is still opportunity at retail because the very, very nipping on the heels of this number 1 was number 2, which is I feel something. I have an affinity for that cause. I have a relationship with that cause. I believe in that cause. And that ranked number 2. And so that's the good news for all nonprofits in the space about not only understanding where brand recognition plays in these kinds of opportunities and these kind of pitches, but really what that second thing means. If your cause is something that you can explain in 5 seconds and really create a personal connection with it, then your opportunity at register is really limitless. So that's that corner. And then if you go all the way over to sort of the smiley face, this is the information that retailers right now are sort of salivating over. We did find at the top stat there that 75% of consumers felt more positively about the charity after giving. So think about that. That's a great marketing message, right? So you're the cause that Walgreens or whoever has asked to give to at register, and 79% of the people that give at register feel better about your cause, feel more positively about your brand and your cause. So that's a very interesting stat for the nonprofit sector when deciding, is this the right stuff for us to do? What's the positive impact when we do these campaigns at register? But the thing that is very compelling to the retailers, who often believe off the cuff that they are annoying their consumer, is that 60% of them responded that they felt more positively about the brand. So that's a really interesting fact for them. We have talked to many retailers, worked with many retailers in this space, and they'll say to me, we will continue to do point-of-sale activities if we know that at the end of the day, that person is connecting that moment where they got to be a hero for a cause to our brand. We want them to leave remembering us and remembering that we are the one that sort of brought the opportunity and feeling better about us because of it and about our brand. And what we found is that they do. 60% of them do. And so that's a good number for people to know, and to not only for brands to recognize and continue to do these campaigns, but for nonprofits to understand that and really use that as part of the pitch process. And that's sort of a general overview of the findings. And then I just really quickly wanted to show that we asked about recall. We asked about, in the spring and in the fall, because remember we did the study twice, who do you remember? And this was unaided. These were open-ended questions. So what charities do you recall giving to at register? And you'll see that it's different. There are some people that sort of make both lists. And that makes sense because of sort of the proclivity and really the saturation of their campaigns at register. But what the interesting fact here is that it does change between spring and fall. And so that's just a really good thing to know in terms of pitching. And really, if you're going to capitalize with the consumer, if you're a nonprofit that does this, really your ability to capitalize with the marketplace is right after the campaign's over. So this is really something about, if you look at these from a multifaceted standpoint and you think about how do we capitalize on the momentum and the exposure we're getting at retail, at point of sale through these retailers, your opportunity to do that and your planning around that should probably happen right after the campaign is over, because people really, are remembering different causes at different times of year, which makes sense. And then real quickly, I just wanted to show you, we also asked about brand retailer recall. So who do you recall giving to? What retailer do you recall allowing you the opportunity to give at register? And so you can see Walmart's really happy with this, because it doesn't matter when you ask what time of year, Walmart tops that list both times. So they're happy that what they're doing at register is making a connection with consumers. And it changes. Obviously, it changes from spring to fall, but you can see, again, some consistency there. And this we really did for the retail side of the house to prove to them that there is marketing value in these kind of things and there is brand value in doing these kinds of promotions. And so I will just jump back, Amy, real quick to the overview slide, if that's helpful for people to look at. And Amy and I had talked before. What did you say?
I would call that the money slide, Maureen.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
There you go.
I hope everybody here just, take a screen. Well, you'll get a copy of this, but certainly this is what you want to reference whenever you're talking to your team and talking about, initiatives on this front. Sorry. Go ahead, Maureen. Sorry to interrupt.
No, and I was just going to say, I know that we wanted to do more of a sort of a question and answer conversation session, and we can jump right into that. I just wanted to say that a lot of people will have questions, or usually do, about the demographics, about, well, how did the millennials respond versus the boomers, and how did men respond versus women? And all of that, we go very, very deep into that in the actual study that can be downloaded from our site. So there's a lot of answers to those kinds of questions in the bigger study. It's much bigger than these 4 or 5 slides we just looked at.
Sure. And to your point, yes, one of the questions that popped up, and this was a question I had as well. Could you just review for us the methodology? Who were the people surveyed in general? How many, and any demographics?
Yeah, and so it's all demographics. So we did a random sampling, but we said to the agency that we use, we really do want a random sampling. We want men, we want women, we want all age groups within that. We want to look at boomers, we want to look at millennials, we want to look at Gen X. Like, we want to look at everything. So it is literally a look at that entire sort of demographic. And again, on the study downloadable, we'll break down how they answered and how they trended in answering per demographic. So a random sampling, and it went out to consumers. Over 3,000 consumers were asked. And again, that's double a usual sampling size in terms of direct-to-consumer research. But we did that because I was surprised. I was a little bit surprised by the responses and wanted to make sure it wasn't a blip, so we did it twice. So 2 sets of 1,500 at separate times. And that's this box on there, and you can probably read it better than I, just talks about sort of the sampling, the population, the ages, and then it talks about sort of random, it talks about everything we just talked about in that little box, if that's helpful.
Okay. That's great. Thank you. And that is compelling. That is good stuff. It seems like it's funny. We were just talking about this amongst ourselves here in the office. It seems like these checkout campaigns are everywhere, and we all have people have different feelings about it. And I'm wondering how skewed we are, especially if you work in nonprofit. You might think that maybe you think they're annoying, more annoying than the regular consumer. Maybe it's just, being always on the end of having to raise funds that you're like, oh, look at these guys. They get the easy ask. They're having somebody else ask at the checkout. So could you maybe speak a little bit more, Maureen, to the general feelings of consumers as they're asked, and maybe also include what type of ask has performed. I don't know if you studied that particular aspect of it, but what type of an ask works best?
Well, it's interesting that you say that about us being in the sector and maybe being a little skewed. I remember when I did sit in the nonprofit chair that to me it was more about my competitive nature. When I was asked at register to give to somebody else, I would go, oh, that could have been us, kind of thing. So maybe that's why we're skewed a little bit, our competition, our competitive natures. So what we found, again, was that 71% are giving. So they're giving it, and more than half of those people don't mind it. They actually like it. They're welcoming it. So what that said to us when we translated the data, because we always translate data, is that it's so commonplace now that it's not really disturbing or it's not really annoying. You welcome it at this point. You expect it. It's part of the common vernacular. We've made it commonplace. This is a common way of doing fundraising because it isn't so disliked. It isn't something overwhelmingly we didn't hear. No, we're not giving and we can't stand it. We did not hear that. And again, did it twice. What we did hear is that, and this is interesting because a lot of people have philosophy around this, and so it's just an interesting outcome. What we heard is that consumers prefer to be solicited by the cashier at the register, 62% of them. So that's interesting, right? If you sit down with Clark Sweat at Children's Miracle Network and you study what they do, they know that the actual digital PIN pad ask is more productive. They get more of an outcome there, because you take out human error, right? You take out the ability of the register person to forget to ask you at register, or they just aren't comfortable asking at register, and so they don't. So you take that all away when you move to the PIN pad, and there are definite upticks in donations when a PIN pad is engaged. But we heard from the consumer that they like to be solicited. They like the personal connection from the cashier. So lesson learned there in the translation is do both if possible. If you can get it at the PIN pad, that's fantastic because you take out human error and you will see an automatic uptick in donations. But if at the same time you still continue to say, We want the cashier to ask. We want to incentivize them to do that. We want to really ingratiate them with the causes and the brands so that they feel like an ambassador and they feel really engaged in wanting to ask. And there's a lot of tricks in the trade to sort of training that front-end staff to do that. The combination of both is probably the winning solution now, based on the fact that people want to be asked by the cashier or the front-end staff. And the other thing that we asked them was, how do you prefer to donate? Like, what amount do you prefer to donate? And what we really heard is that 66% want to donate less than $2 at one time, because we get that question all the time. Should we ask for a $1 donation, a $5 donation, a $10 donation? And obviously that's a unique conversation per retailer, per their point of purchase price. So Walmart is going to be a whole lot different than Pottery Barn in terms of price point. So it's a conversation that you have to have. There's no prescriptive black and white. It just depends. But this should help shape that $1 give is really what people are looking at. And they responded that they like to add on the $1 to the bill. So it wasn't about a roundup. That didn't score first. And a lot of people do roundups, and there's nothing wrong with them. I don't mean there's anything wrong with them. But the $1 at register, adding that to my bill was the number one way that people wanted to be asked and then wanted to donate. So again, take the data and translate it for the situation. If you're sitting in Williams-Sonoma, maybe you don't ask for $1 because of the price point of what people are buying and the amount of time the sales associate spends with the actual customer. If it's Walmart, that's a different story, right? You're not interacting with the salespeople. You're literally going through register, and the price points should be lower in terms of what you're purchasing. So just something to think about, always a conversation, but lays a foundation of data to help support where you're going to go with these campaigns.
Maureen, a question from the audience is, the question from the audience was, does the geographic area matter? I mean, obviously this was a national survey. This particular audience member was wondering where New Jersey donors fit. So I don't know if you happen to have that data handy.
You know what? That is a great question, whoever that is. That's an excellent question. So the thing that we're doing, because a lot of people have found a lot of interest in this, is we're doing a follow-up. And that follow-up is going to do things like that. Geographically, are people giving at register more than other parts of the country? We're going deep into the sectors. What we didn't do is go very deep into the sectors. So are people responding differently in terms of their desire to do it or their feelings, their affinities around doing it at a grocery store versus a specialty store like Williams-Sonoma? Is online have less of a feeling of animosity, and people really embrace more in the online space versus bricks and mortar? We're going to go very deep into the sectors in a follow-up study. Geography and other things that we just wanted to go deeper into now, but geography is one of those. So this was a national study, and we didn't look at sort of geographic regions, which one fundraises more, but it's going to be part of a follow-up study to see if there's any difference.
Okay, good. Thank you. And Candace, thank you for that excellent question. We have another question here. Well, actually, there are several. So everybody, thank you for being patient as I go through the questions. But when did you say that the follow-up study would take place?
So right now we're doing a baseline study in corporate alliances. We're going to be releasing to people to let them know sort of a baseline, meaning, how many organizations are doing it, is a specific sector in the nonprofit doing corporate alliances more than others, how many FTEs, what are they raising? We're doing a baseline study on corporate alliances, and this will follow after that. So we're formulating the questions now, running them through our advisory committee that looks at our research questions, researchers, behavioralists, HR people, looking at the questions. And so we're formulating it now, but we have not gone out yet and asked. We're still also asking. We have a couple of summits we're overseeing with some of our nonprofit partners where they're pulling in their corporate partners, and we're facilitating some summits. And we're going to ask those retail companies what questions are missing. So it's slated for Q2 of next year to come out Q2, but we're still kind of formulating the right questions.
Okay, thank you. Maureen, what about, let's speak for a moment about the attitudes of the retailers or the brands with regard to these campaigns. What data do you have on how open they are? I mean, the 60% of folks who feel better about the brand after being asked, for example, that's a helpful point to present, I think, when you're approaching them. Do you have any information on how open they are or what the attitudes are at this point? And I'm sorry if that was already answered, but if you could just answer it again if it were.
No.
Thanks.
Sure. In general, and this is not data-driven, so again, that follow-up, that's why we're going to the brands. We really want to have really solid follow-up questions that go even deeper into this study. But we work with them all the time, and we pitch all the time. Probably somebody at Good Scout is pitching every day on behalf of a nonprofit and with a nonprofit. So what we know is that they're open to it. Retailers are open to it, and they're used to being asked for it. It's not an uncommon ask from a nonprofit that walks in the door and says, we'd like to do this. It is something that is now, as I mentioned earlier, just part of the vernacular. So what we see is that retailers are open to doing it. On their end, they just have to make some decisions around how often are we going to do it? Are we going to be that organization that does it every month? Are we going to do it one time for one cause? How often are we going to do this, and what's the right mix for our particular consumer? Because they know a lot about their own consumer, obviously. And it's really about not their lack of ability or desire to do it, because it's very common. And that 60%, by the way, is really, really helpful in reinforcing that you're right. It is a good thing to do, and people do feel better about you when you do it. But their whole thing and their analysis when you're pitching, and I hope this is the useful point for the nonprofits on the phone, is how are we going to do this? How often? Are we going to do it digitally? Are we going to do it to the pin pad? Are we going to actually tax our associates? If we do, what's the incentive for them? Should we be doing it once? Should we be doing it for 1 week, 2 weeks, a full month? So usually the decisions are around who to partner with, who's the best partner for success, and what is it going to look like? What is it going to look like for us? We very often don't find a retailer that is so vehemently opposed to something at register. But if they are, they'll tell you right away. We're not going to do anything direct to consumer. We'd prefer to do a percentage of sales of a purchase of something like our bottled water or whatever. We're not going to go direct to consumer. I hear that maybe 10% of the time when we're talking to retailers, and they are forthcoming in the beginning when you start to have that conversation. And you just have to be ready to say, okay, well, what could we do?
So then in order to be, effective as you're meeting with a retailer, one of the things it sounds like what you're saying is to have a flexible but a suggested plan of how you would go about the campaign, because it's one less thing that they have to really think hard about, or at least a starting point for a conversation. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So you have some data as a starting point about it's a good thing, and people are doing it, and they welcome it, and they like it, and they feel better about you, and they feel better about us. And so let's capitalize on all that goodwill out there, and let's do this if possible. Can we do a campaign at register? And right away they're going to say to you, okay, we already do them, and here's how we do them now, and maybe it's something that we just have to make a choice now. Are you one of the right causes to do it with? Or if they've never done it before, then you can use some of this data as best practices. So maybe we should, depending again on their price point, ask for $1 or $5 or $10 at the register. Let's do it as an add-on, as a SKU that you actually scan. Like, you can have conversations about best practices. But if you start with, and even on a pre-phone call before you go to a meeting, if you start with, are you willing to think about this, and does your organization do this, and are you willing and open to have a conversation about another partnership, or, God forbid, but replacing one of your current partners with us, and we've had a lot of causes that have done that pretty successfully. It's always, no matter what you're pitching, this particular corporate alliance, point of sale pitch, or other sorts of corporate alliances and campaigns that you can do with the company, flexibility, a conversation, and getting to that win-win is essential.
That's helpful. There are so many, right, such a large percentage of organizations out there who are smaller or local versus the large group. So kind of taking a look at that, we have a question. Are national retailers more likely to select national charities, or are they open to working with regional or local charities? So maybe you could speak to your thoughts on that.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting to think about what we're seeing trending in the CSR space is, and I'll talk specifically about restaurant in a minute, is that organizations have sort of that national overlay. So they've chosen their pillars or their causes that they're going to support. I know we all know that. And that for a while was really that was it. So you went through the community relations department or the marketing team or the corporate communications team to try to get a relationship going, and you'd hear, well, that's not part of our giving pillars or whatever it might be. So they sort of stuck to those. But what they realized is that they were limiting themselves in terms of the local market, in terms of that localization and really embracing locally that branch, that franchisee, or that store in your market. So they needed to have a little bit of flexibility in there. So what we're seeing now is that companies are taking up causes as opposed to nonprofits. So here we give to cancer, or we give to heart disease, or whatever it might be. And nationally, they are aligning with national brands. They have to. They have to align with an organization that they feel every consumer that touches their product nationally, if they're a national brand, can relate to, can feel like if I hand $1 over, then I know it's doing something, not only in this community, but something I understand that touches my life. So they have to do that kind of thing. But what we see is that then that's an overlay to a local market plan that gives local managers, division managers, whatever it might be, freedom within those cause pillars to align locally, to align regionally, to align with organizations that they know are going to help their foot traffic or help how people view them in the marketplace. And so that's what we're really seeing a trend towards, a national sort of set plan for CSR with a local market overlay that allows for flexibility. So because we're seeing that trending, it absolutely means that just because Walgreens has decided they're doing things with X, Y, and Z, you can go talk to a division manager, you can go talk to a store manager, and they should have some freedom to have a conversation, even sometimes outside of those giving pillars, that makes sense for them in their market to be that corporate social citizen in that marketplace and connect locally with consumers. So it isn't just about those national blue chip nonprofits. There's opportunity across the board. You just have to be realistic about what that's going to be for your organization and your cause.
Thank you. So following up on that, and obviously now we know it's important to understand if it's a national retailer, understand what their cause pillars are, and present this as an opportunity for them to align themselves locally. Now, knowing that, could you speak a little bit as to the particular type of person that you want to reach out to? You mentioned a couple of titles, and if you could maybe just expand on that a tiny bit, that would be helpful.
Sure. And by the way, as a total side note, franchisees and sometimes restaurants and restaurant as a category, as a sector, isn't appropriate for your cause for whatever reason. And I don't necessarily just mean quick service, but just restaurants in general. Many of those are franchised, and so there absolutely is local decision-making in a region or within operators or owners network. Car dealerships are like that. They have regional, as you know, associations. And so those kinds of, those are ripe for local market or local charitable connections. But so a lot of people believe that companies, when it comes to cause marketing, corporate social responsibility, how they deal with philanthropy, are really all buttoned up and you should always go to X. And it's just not the case. They're just as sort of crazy about where that lands as sometimes we are as nonprofits. Sometimes it's in development, sometimes it's in marketing, sometimes it's your hospital. If you're a hospital, it's even more confusing about where these kinds of relationships might fit. But not every company looks at it through the same lens and the same department. So community relations is sometimes where we end up getting shoved, for lack of better words, and that tends not to be the area that can understand the conversation about marketing and the value to your brand. And if you also sort of take this and leverage your assets and your advertising or whatever it might be in your marketing realm and you promote it, you're going to see some positive brand value in it. The community relations teams generally don't have that generally. Some of them do. Some of them are very good about that, but generally don't have that kind of look. They're looking more to say, what do you need locally in the community, or what can we do and what can we give and why. So we're usually pushed there, and so you have to start the conversation sometimes there, but it's helpful to try to multifacet that conversation and ask that community relations person to bring in a marketing or a communications counterpart. The other place we'll get shoved sometimes is the grants, right? We give grants. So that's not at all where we want to be in terms of this is a partnership conversation. It's a brand and marketing and fundraising conversation all sort of swished together. And so we don't want to be in the grant world. So if we end up there, we certainly don't want to be there to have this conversation. But point of sale can start in community relations if that's where you have to. Again, ask that other people attend the meeting. Marketing, sponsorship money, is marketing money, and you have to justify it. And so a lot of times you'll end up talking to a marketing person, and my advice there is if you don't speak marketing, then go find a mentor that helps you speak marketing, because they're going to ask very specific ROI questions once the niceties are over and they're compelled by the cause and they feel like that is something they want to align with as an organization. At some point in that conversation, it's going to get real specific about ROI and marketing value, and so you want to be able to speak and know what value you and your program and your assets bring to the promotion. Or corporate communications. It can often end up in the PR world that because some companies view this as really great PR, they haven't quite figured out yet what it does for their brand and how it can increase sales and that kind of stuff. They just see it as a great opportunity to raise their visibility positively in the marketplace. You could end up with a corporate communications person, and again, the same thing. If you don't speak PR, then bring somebody to the meeting that does, or certainly find a mentor on the board or whatever that can help with that. So corporate communications, marketing, community relations, grants, you'll end up in several of those places trying to find the right person to have this conversation with.
Do you have any warnings for pitfalls that you've seen? Or, for example, how important is it to do your homework and know a little bit about the retailer or the brand and maybe their past experiences?
So a couple things I would say is that if it's an existing relationship somewhere throughout your organization and you don't actually know that, or you can't sum up for them sort of in total what their support of your cause has been, that does not go over well in the room. So I've been in a room where a nonprofit said, I know that we've had a relationship in the past and we've done a lot of stuff together, and the retailer, it was an actual retailer, looked at the nonprofit professional and said, yes, we've generated $435,000 for you last year. The company knew that. The cause didn't, and that didn't go over well. So that's sort of a pitfall. I present a lot with Bonnie Gordon, and she used to be in charge of who they would connect with in the charitable space at Walgreens. She just recently retired. And she would answer that question by saying, if you come in the room and you really don't have any clue what we do in corporate social responsibility, you don't know who we're already giving to at register, she would say, heck, you don't even know that we're at the corner of happy and healthy is our advertising slogan. She said, I would be extremely nice to you for the half hour that I would allow you to pitch, or the hour, and then once you left that room, you were never going to hear from me again because you didn't care. You didn't do your homework. You didn't want to be a partner of ours so bad that you didn't take the time to look in public sources and curate a little bit of data about what we're doing now. And she said, you didn't have to know everything. Clearly you don't work for us, but just to have a good understanding or a general understanding, to even ask questions about, what did you do with so-and-so? I read this article. She would say that was a really big misnomer. And then the other thing that I've seen happen in point-of-sale pitching, but, corporate alliance pitching in general, is there's a lot of time spent on the cause. We're a fantastic cause, and this is what we do, and the 50 minutes of the hour meeting is spent on the cause. and there's no time to talk about, so how do we bring to bear the power of that cause, the power of our brand, the assets we have, come together and talk to you about how to bring that to bear for a partnership we might do together, and kind of what would you be looking for and what are you looking for in charitable partnerships or partnerships at point of sale at retail. So spending too much time talking about the cause and not just teeing it up in its, here's why we exist and here's what we do and here's the need we still have and here's how we can tackle that together in a quick sort of formulaic conversation, then that's a big mistake we've seen at Well, too, not having a conversation, just sort of talking about the cause. And I've seen that sometimes, and you can see that it's a great cause, but you know what? There are many, many, many fantastic causes out there. So don't just weigh the weight of the conversation on the power of the cause. Does that help answer that question?
That does. Yeah, you actually just reminded me of something, too, that I think of. Sometimes I think we lose sight, and there are a lot of similarities. People probably, they may shudder a little when they hear this, but there are a lot of similarities between sales and fundraising.
Yeah.
And ultimately, sales 101 is you have to answer with them, what's in it for me? What's in it for the person you're talking to, not you, but me, the person you're selling to? What are they going to get out of it? And I think that you've just really hit the nail on the head with that particular thing. It needs to be a conversation, and sure, they want to know about your organization and what you're doing, and impact is important. You need to be able to justify it and show it, but at the same time, they're not doing it for their, just for the heck of it. They need it definitely more compelling. Let's put it this way. It would be more compelling, and they'd be more inspired to join in if they can see that there will be some benefit to their bottom line. So that's helpful. Thank you. Other questions out there? I think we've covered just about everything. I want to thank you. If there's any other last questions now. But Maureen, I want to say thank you so much for your insight on this and sharing this data. It's definitely, I know it was eye-opening to me and to my friend Eileen. We're sitting here and just, each of us probably has our own perspective, or our own opinion of what we think people think when they're asked at the register. So it's great to see some actual data of what different people think. Thank you for telling us we can go download the full study and find out more, because it'll be interesting to see, obviously, different age groups and how they respond, for example, and get some more suggestions on, how we can take part and create successful campaigns and help our causes. So,
and I really,
thank you.
If I can take just one more second, I just really want to make sure that people understand that local market opportunity is really viable. So, often there's much stronger relationships with local market. You can take MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, and they did this great promotion at point of sale with Stripes convenience store, which is really just a Texas-based convenience store. But Stripes had been doing had a lot of national partners, including CMN, that they were doing that point of sale activities for. And MD Anderson really came in with that local market. But we're here with you in Texas, and we're treating Texas patients. And let's make that connection to the consumer, and let's go at this together, and let's really try to drive it home. And it was, leaps and bounds more successful than the other point of sale campaigns that they had done for national organizations. So the local opportunity, really maximizing those local relationships that are always so strong at the local level, there's a ton of opportunity. And you don't necessarily need to target Walmart, but you can certainly target a 15-store franchise that could be doing anything, bike shop, whatever it is, and you can see very consistent results. And locally, a lot of people, I just wanted to mention this real quick, a lot of organizations will bundle this ask in a bigger ask, basically. So they'll be going to, sort of the regional, let's just say HEB. HEB is a Texas grocery store, so it might not be one that you've heard of in other parts of the organization. So if there's a cause that's sort of local to Texas or local to one of the cities, and they go to HEB, they're going to not just ask them for this. They're going to say, you know what, we'd like to create a partnership where we're doing something at point of sale, where we're also engaging your employees in other ways, where we're talking about including your vendors in some stuff and how we can do that, where we're getting you to, do a straight sponsorship of a high-profile event, and you're sort of wrapping this ask locally into bigger conversations, and that's really a great way to go, too, when you're identifying a pipeline and how to approach them.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, and I'm glad you shared that. We didn't have that specific question, so I'm so glad you included that. I want to say thanks to everybody for joining us. Maureen, I was going to ask if you had any last words for successful campaigns, which you beat me to it. Thank you. And until next time, everybody, I want to say thanks so much for joining us. You will receive an email hopefully later today that will include the recording to the presentation. You can watch it on demand. You can share it with your colleagues. And again, you'll be able to use and reference that changes the checkout infographic that looks really useful. And I will include Maureen's contact information as well. So thanks to all of you. Maureen, thank you. Eileen, thank you. And thanks to all of you out there on the phone and listening on the computer. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for all the great work that you do. Take care.